I could barely see where I was going. The trees stretched endlessly in every direction, their tangled roots clawing at my feet. The air was thick, humid, and every sound made my heart pound faster. Something was watching me. I wasn't alone. And whatever was out there, it was big. A gorilla. A real, living, breathing gorilla. And it was standing just a few feet away from me. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But I knew, if I made the wrong move, this might be the last mistake I ever make. And that is when everything changed. I never planned to end up in the middle of the jungle, alone, scared, and unsure if I would make it out alive. It all started as an exciting adventure, a journey into the heart of nature. But in a matter of hours, everything went horribly wrong. One wrong step, one moment of distraction, and suddenly, I was lost. The towering trees stretched endlessly, their thick branches blocking out the sky. I called out for help, but my voice was swallowed by the vast, endless wilderness. No one answered. No one could hear me. I tried to retrace my steps, but every direction looked the same. The ground was uneven, roots twisting like traps beneath my feet. My heart pounded as I pushed forward, brushing past thick vines, my hands scraped by thorns. I had no food, no water, and no idea where I was going. My stomach twisted in hunger, my throat dry from panic. Every rustle, every distant growl sent shivers through me. The jungle wasn't just beautiful, it was alive, watching me, waiting. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching like dark fingers between the trees. I needed to find shelter, but where? Everything around me was unfamiliar, and the deeper I went, the more I realized how alone I truly was. Birds called out in strange, echoing cries, and in the distance, something howled. My breath caught. I wasn't the only one wandering these trees. There were predators here, creatures that hunted in the dark. My legs ached, my body screamed for rest, but stopping wasn't an option. Then I heard it. A deep, guttural sound, something powerful and primal. It wasn't a bird, and it wasn't the wind. It was close, too close. My pulse raced as I turned my head, scanning the thick brush around me. The jungle had been terrifying before, but now I knew real fear. Something was coming, something big, and I had no idea what to do. The rustling grew louder, branches snapping under the weight of something massive. My breath hitched as I stood frozen, too scared to move. Then, from the shadows, it emerged. A towering figure, dark fur glistening under the slivers of sunlight breaking through the trees. Broad shoulders, powerful arms, and deep, intelligent eyes that locked onto mine. A gorilla, a real, living, breathing gorilla, standing just a few feet away from me. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I had read about gorillas, seen them in documentaries, but nothing prepared me for this moment. He was enormous, his silver-streaked back a sign of age and power. I knew these animals could be gentle, but they could also be dangerous if threatened. And right now, I had no idea what he was thinking. He stared at me, unmoving, his chest rising and falling with slow, controlled breaths. I didn't know whether to run, stand still, or drop to the ground and hope he lost interest. For what felt like forever, we just stared at each other. My fingers tightened around a broken branch I had picked up earlier, completely useless against a creature this strong. He could end me in an instant if he wanted to. But he didn't move, didn't charge. He just watched, his dark eyes studying me like he was trying to understand what I was doing in his world. And then, something even stranger happened. He turned his head slightly, looking past me, as if checking for danger. My fear mixed with confusion. Was he making sure I was safe? I took a slow step backward, my foot crunching against a dry leaf. The sound broke the moment, and the gorilla let out a low grunt, his nostrils flaring. My breath caught in my throat. Was that a warning? A test? I had no idea what to do. But one thing was certain. I wasn't alone in this jungle anymore. And whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, I was about to find out. I didn't dare move as the gorilla watched me, his deep, thoughtful eyes scanning my every movement. He wasn't afraid of me. If anything, it felt like he was trying to understand me. My body was tense, every instinct screaming at me to run, but somehow I knew that would be a mistake. Instead, I stayed still, barely breathing, waiting to see what he would do next. Then, without warning, he turned and walked away. Just like that. No aggression, no attack, just slow, deliberate steps into the jungle. I let out a shaky breath, relief flooding through me, but before I could even process what had happened, he stopped. He turned his head slightly, just enough for me to see his face, then let out a low grunt. I didn't understand it at first, but something inside me told me he wanted me to follow. I hesitated. Was this some kind of trick? Was I walking straight into danger? But at this point, I had no better options. I was alone, exhausted, and completely lost. If this gorilla wanted to hurt me, he could have done it already. So, with cautious steps, I followed him into the trees. As I walked behind him, I noticed the way he moved, not just with power, but with purpose. He led me through the thick brush, past trees covered in vines, deeper into the jungle. At first, I wondered if he was taking me to his family, his troop. But then, I saw it. Water. A small, clear stream running through the jungle, its surface reflecting the golden light of the setting sun. I hadn't realized how thirsty I was until that moment. My throat was dry, my lips cracked. Without thinking, I rushed forward, dropping to my knees and cupping the cool water in my hands. As I drank, I glanced up at the gorilla. He was watching me again, his large body resting against a tree. He had brought me here. He had helped me. But why? Wild animals weren't supposed to do this. They weren't supposed to care about lost humans. And yet, there he was, sitting just a few feet away, his presence strangely comforting. For the first time since I got lost, I didn't feel completely alone. Over the next few hours, I stayed close, watching him, learning from him. He pulled leaves from the trees and chewed them, showing me what was safe to eat. He sat calmly, grooming himself, occasionally glancing at me as if checking to make sure I was still there. I started mimicking his movements, hesitantly picking at the same leaves, chewing slowly. The bitter taste filled my mouth, but I forced myself to eat. I had no choice. If I wanted to survive, I had to trust him. And somehow, deep inside, I already did. The jungle had started to feel different. Less like a place of fear and more like a strange, living world I was beginning to understand. The gorilla, my silent guardian, hadn't left my side. He moved with purpose, always aware of our surroundings, his ears twitching at the slightest sound. I had started to feel safe with him, but that safety didn't last long. It happened so fast. One moment the jungle was calm, just the distant hum of insects and the rustling of leaves in the wind. The next, a deep, guttural growl shattered the silence. My body went rigid. That wasn't the gorilla. It was something else, something dangerous. The gorilla's posture changed instantly. His muscles tensed, his eyes sharp and alert. He turned his head slightly, listening. Then, the growl came again, closer this time. My heart pounded as I scanned the trees, searching for the source. And then I saw it. A flash of golden fur moving between the leaves, low to the ground, slow, calculated. A leopard. My breath caught in my throat. I had read about leopards, seen their sleek bodies and sharp teeth in books and on TV. But this wasn't a picture. This was real. And it was hunting. Its piercing eyes locked onto me, its body crouched low, muscles coiled like a spring, ready to pounce. My legs felt weak. I had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. This was it. But before I could even react, the gorilla stepped forward. He let out a deep, earth-shaking roar, his chest puffed out, his powerful arms rising high above his head. The sound was unlike anything I had ever heard, loud, commanding, full of raw strength. The leopard hesitated, its eyes darting between me and the massive silverback now standing between us. For a moment, it was a battle of wills. Two wild creatures, both powerful in their own way, testing each other. Then, the leopard snarled, baring its teeth. My body tensed. Was it going to attack? The gorilla slammed his fists against his chest, the echo bouncing through the trees like thunder. The leopard flinched, hesitated again. Then, in a blur of movement, it turned and disappeared into the shadows. I couldn't breathe. My body was shaking, my hands gripping the dirt beneath me. I had been seconds away from death, and the only reason I was still alive was because of him, my protector, my guardian. The gorilla had saved me. He turned to look at me, his deep, knowing eyes meeting mine. He had risked everything for me. But why? I was just a lost human in his jungle. Yet, in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just a stranger to him anymore. To him, I was something worth protecting. The jungle felt different now, quieter, as if the danger had passed, but something else lingered in the air, something unspoken. I sat there, my heart still racing, staring at the spot where the leopard had disappeared. I was alive because of him. The gorilla had saved me, protected me like I was one of his own. But as I looked into his deep, dark eyes, I realized something else. This moment wasn't going to last forever. He turned away from me, his massive frame moving effortlessly through the trees. For the first time, I noticed the way he looked at the jungle, scanning the world around him like he belonged here. Because he did. This was his home, his world. And I didn't belong in it. My chest tightened. I didn't want to leave him. He was the only reason I had made it this far. But I knew I couldn't stay. Somewhere beyond these trees, people were looking for me, my family, my world. I had to go back. As if he understood, the gorilla turned and started walking. Not away from me, but ahead, leading me once again. I followed, stepping carefully over roots and vines, moving through the dense jungle in silence. My throat tightened. Was this it? Was he showing me the way out? Then, through the trees, I saw something, a clearing. Sunlight poured in, the air feeling lighter, freer. And in the distance, voices, faint but real, human voices. My heart leapt. I wasn't lost anymore. I was going home. I turned back to him, my guardian, my protector. He stood there watching me, his massive form framed by the jungle. We held each other's gaze, and in that moment, no words were needed. He had found me when I was alone. He had guided me, fed me, saved my life. And now, he was letting me go. I took a step toward him, my throat tight with emotion. "Thank you," I whispered. He didn't move, didn't react, just stared with those deep, knowing eyes. Then, slowly, he turned and disappeared into the jungle, vanishing like a shadow among the trees. I stood there for a long time, listening to the distant rustling, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. I had come into the jungle a lost girl, but I was leaving with something more, something I could never explain. A connection, a bond. A moment in time that would stay with me forever. I stepped into the clearing, the warmth of the sun hitting my skin for the first time in what felt like forever. The voices grew louder, shouting, calling my name. My legs felt weak, my body exhausted, but I forced myself to move forward. Then, through the trees, I saw them. A search party, people rushing toward me, their faces filled with shock and relief. I was found. My breath hitched as strong arms wrapped around me. Familiar voices, words of comfort, but my mind was somewhere else. The jungle, him, the gorilla who had saved me. I turned back, my eyes searching the trees, hoping for one last glimpse, but he was gone, swallowed by the wild, just as he was meant to be. As they led me away, questions came flooding in. How did you survive? Were you alone? I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come. How could I explain what had happened? Would they even believe me if I tried? That a wild animal, a creature many feared, had protected me, guided me, saved me. It felt too unreal, too impossible. But I knew the truth. Days passed, then weeks. The jungle became a memory, something distant yet always present in the back of my mind. At night, I would close my eyes and hear the rustling leaves, the distant calls of the wild. I would see his eyes, deep, watchful, understanding. He wasn't just an animal. He wasn't just a creature of the jungle. He was something more. People asked me if I was afraid, if I had nightmares. But the truth was, I wasn't afraid at all. The scariest part hadn't been the jungle. It hadn't even been facing the leopard. The scariest part was leaving, saying goodbye to something I would never experience again. A connection with the wild, a bond with a creature that wasn't supposed to care about me, but did. Even now, I wonder if he ever thinks about me the way I think about him. If he remembers the lost girl who stumbled into his world, I'll never know. And maybe that's the way it's meant to be. But one thing is certain, I will never forget him. The guardian of the jungle, the gorilla who saved me,